The wedding hall was full of laughter, light, and music. Guests clinked glasses, children ran around tables, and the bride, Emily, looked like a dream in her white gown. For most people, this day was perfect. For Linda, Emily's mother, it was supposed to be the proudest moment of her life. She sat near the front, wearing a simple but elegant dress. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age but from nerves. Linda had raised Emily alone after her divorce. She had no big family name, no wealth to lean on. She had only her hard work and her love for her daughter. For years, she worked 2 jobs just to make sure Emily never went hungry, even if it meant she sometimes did. She thought that all the sacrifices would be worth it one day. The day she would see Emily walk down the aisle and know that she had done her job as a mother. But Linda didn't know what was about to happen. The microphone passed from one guest to another. People gave sweet toasts, some funny, some emotional. Then it was Emily's turn. She stood, smiling brightly at her new husband, Daniel. The room hushed as she lifted the microphone. Everyone expected a beautiful speech. But instead, Emily's smile faded as she looked toward Linda. Her voice was sharp. "I just want to say something honest tonight," she began. A few guests chuckled nervously, waiting for a joke. Emily's expression hardened. "My family, the people who raised me, who loved me, are all sitting here. But one person in this room doesn't deserve to be called family. She never did. My mother should not even be here." The room froze. Linda's heart dropped. Whispers ran through the crowd like a wave. Some gasped out loud. Linda's hands shook in her lap as her face turned pale. Her ears rang so loudly she barely heard the rest of Emily's words. "She was never there for me," Emily continued, her voice full of bitterness. "She gave me nothing. If it wasn't for Daniel's family, I wouldn't even know what love looks like. So let's just be honest. This wedding is possible because of them, not her." A silence heavier than stone filled the hall. Linda's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to explain, to remind her daughter of the nights she went hungry so Emily could eat, of the countless hours she worked just to afford school supplies, of the mornings she walked miles in the rain to get Emily to class. But Linda couldn't say a word. Her throat burned with tears she refused to let fall. She looked around. Some guests avoided her eyes. Others stared in pity. A few shook their heads in disbelief at Emily's cruelty. For Linda, it felt like the ground had opened beneath her. Her daughter, the girl she had loved more than anything in the world, had just erased her existence in front of everyone. Slowly, Linda pushed back her chair. Her legs felt weak, like they might collapse. She reached for her purse with trembling fingers. All she wanted was to get out, to leave before the tears spilled down her face. She didn't want to give Emily or anyone else the satisfaction of seeing her break. As she turned toward the door, the silence grew heavier. Guests shifted in their seats, torn between speaking up and staying quiet. No one dared to stop Emily. And no one reached out to Linda. Every step toward the exit felt like walking through fire. Linda's heart screamed, "Why, Emily? After everything I gave you? After all the nights I prayed for you, worked for you, lived only for you?" But Emily didn't look at her. The bride stood tall, holding Daniel's arm as if she had just spoken some brave truth, as if humiliating her mother was a victory. Linda's heels clicked softly against the floor. Her body shook with the effort to hold back tears. She told herself she would not cry here. She would not make a scene. She would not beg for love from the very child she had given her life to. At the back of the hall, Linda paused for one last look. The guests still sat frozen. Emily lifted her glass in a cold, proud toast. And in that moment, Linda realized something she never wanted to believe. Her daughter was ashamed of her. The words repeated in her mind like an echo she couldn't escape. She never deserved to be here. Each syllable was a knife. Her knees felt weak again, but she forced herself to stand tall. She clutched her purse tighter and turned toward the exit. The music had stopped. The laughter was gone. The only sound now was the deafening silence of a room where love had just been replaced with cruelty. Linda took another step toward the door, ready to vanish from the place that should have been the happiest day of her life. But she didn't know that someone else was about to stand up. Someone who had been listening, watching, and waiting. Someone who could not let the truth be buried under Emily's cruel words. The moment Linda's hand touched the door, a voice broke the silence. And with it, everything changed. Linda froze when she heard the voice behind her. It was deep, calm, and filled with something she hadn't expected, strength. "Wait," Daniel said. The room turned toward him. The groom stood at the table, his face pale but his eyes steady. He looked from Linda to Emily, then slowly reached for the microphone. The air was heavy, and even the faint sound of the chandeliers swaying seemed loud in the silence. Linda stopped walking, her hand still clutching her purse. She didn't want to turn around. She didn't want to cause more attention. But Daniel's voice stopped her in her tracks. He cleared his throat. "Before anyone says another word," he began, "I think something needs to be said." The guests looked at each other in confusion. Emily frowned. "Daniel, please, let's not make this awkward," she said, forcing a laugh. But her voice wavered slightly. Daniel didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Linda. "You said your mother doesn't deserve to be here," he said quietly. "But Emily, you're wrong." A low murmur ran through the crowd. Emily's face stiffened. "Daniel, stop. This isn't the time." He shook his head. "It's exactly the time." He took a deep breath and gripped the microphone tighter. His next words came out steady, powerful, and unforgettable. "She gave you everything you have." 6 words. The entire room went silent again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence before truth hits too hard to ignore. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Emily's mouth fell open. Daniel continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Emily, I've listened to you talk about your mother for months. You told me she wasn't there for you, that she didn't help you, that you built your life alone. But that's not what I saw when I met her." He turned to the guests now, his tone firm. "When I met Linda, I saw a woman who worked 2 jobs for years so her daughter could go to school. I saw hands that were rough from work but gentle when she talked about Emily. She told me once that all she wanted was to see her daughter walk down the aisle happy, even if she couldn't afford to buy a new dress to attend." Gasps filled the hall. Linda's fingers trembled. She hadn't known Daniel even remembered that moment. Daniel went on, his voice growing stronger. "She told me that she would sell anything she owned if it meant giving Emily the wedding of her dreams. And she meant it." He looked at his new wife, his eyes full of pain and disbelief. "And tonight, instead of thanking her, you humiliated her." Emily's face went red. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Some guests nodded quietly. Others looked down, uncomfortable. Daniel set the microphone on the table for a moment and took a shaky breath. He looked around the room and said, "I can't let this moment pass without saying the truth. Because the truth is this woman," he pointed gently toward Linda, "is the reason you are who you are. She's the reason you're standing here in that dress, in this hall, surrounded by love." Emily's hand shook as she held her bouquet. "Daniel, please stop," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. But Daniel didn't stop. "No." Someone needed to say it. He turned to Linda, his voice softening. "Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry for what happened. You shouldn't have been treated that way. Not today. Not ever." The guests began to whisper again. Some even clapped quietly, unsure if it was okay to show support. Linda stood still, tears slowly sliding down her face. She wasn't used to anyone defending her, not like this. Her whole life she had fought alone. Now someone had spoken for her, and she didn't even know how to react. Emily finally dropped her bouquet. "You don't understand," she cried. "You don't know what it was like growing up with her." Daniel looked at her sadly. "You're right," he said. "I don't know every detail. But I know this. If your mother made mistakes, she made them out of love. And you just repaid her with hate." His words hit like thunder. The crowd murmured louder. Emily covered her face and began to cry, realizing too late what she had done. Daniel walked toward Linda and gently took her hand. "You belong here," he said softly. "You're not just a guest. You're family." That single act broke whatever walls Linda had built inside her heart. She began to cry quietly, not out of weakness, but because someone had finally seen her. Daniel turned back to the microphone one last time. "Everyone here should know one thing," he said, his voice steady again. "Love isn't about money or class or perfection. It's about sacrifice. And if that's true, then no one in this room has loved Emily more than her mother." For a moment, no one breathed. Then slowly, people began to clap. It started with one person, then another, until the entire hall was filled with applause. Emily's tears fell freely now. She stared at Daniel in disbelief, realizing that her own husband had chosen truth over silence, and that he was right. Linda wiped her tears and looked at Daniel. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. Daniel smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You've already done enough." As the applause continued, Emily's world started to crumble. Every eye in the room was on her, not as a beautiful bride, but as a daughter who had just been exposed. And while the hall filled with clapping and whispers, Daniel turned to the crowd once more. "Maybe it's time," he said quietly, "that everyone knows what this woman really did to make today possible." The guests leaned forward. Linda froze. Emily's tears stopped mid-fall. A truth was about to come out, one that none of them were ready for. Daniel stood at the center of the hall with the microphone in his hand. His voice was steady, but everyone could see his chest rise and fall. He looked at Linda first, as if asking for permission with his eyes. Linda shook her head slightly, scared of more attention. But Daniel spoke anyway, because silence had already done enough harm. 3 weeks ago, he said, I got a call from a small jewelry shop across town. The room leaned in. Emily's hands tightened around her bouquet. They asked me to confirm a name for a receipt, Daniel continued. The name was Linda Carter. They said she wanted the money sent to my account for the venue deposit. I told them there had to be a mistake. But there wasn't. He took a folded paper from his pocket and held it up. This is the receipt. Whispers spread through the tables. Emily took a step back. Daniel turned to Linda again. You told me not to say anything, he said softly. You begged me to keep it secret because you didn't want Emily to feel ashamed or small. You said this was her day, not yours. Linda covered her mouth with her hand. Tears slipped through her fingers. Daniel faced the guests. She sold her mother's locket. The one she kept for years. The only thing she had left from her own mom. She sold it because we were short on the final payment for the hall. She did it quietly. She did it with love. She didn't tell anyone. There was a sharp gasp near the back. A woman pressed her hands to her chest. A man shook his head slowly, as if trying to wake from a bad dream. The band members stared at the floor. Even the servers stopped moving. Emily's voice came out small. No, that's not true. Mom wouldn't, she didn't have to. Her words broke apart like thin glass. Daniel nodded sadly. I didn't want to believe it either. I went to the shop myself. The owner remembered her. He told me she held the locket for a long time before she let go. He said she cried quietly but smiled at the end. She asked them to transfer the money to me so Emily would never know where it came from. He turned to the head table. That extra flower wall you wanted? The last-minute upgrade to the photographer? The rush on the dress alterations? It was this money that made it possible. It was your mother. Emily reached for a chair to steady herself. Why didn't you tell me? She asked Linda, her voice shaking. Linda finally spoke, but her voice was almost a whisper. Because you said you didn't want anything from me anymore. You told me I embarrassed you when I offered help. I didn't want to fight with you again. I just wanted you to have the day you dreamed of. Emily stared at her mother like she was seeing her for the first time. The words she had thrown earlier, she never deserved to be here, echoed back at her, now heavy and cruel. Shame crawled up her neck and burned her cheeks. Daniel wasn't finished. He held up a small white envelope. She also wrote you a note, Emily. She gave it to me the day she sold the locket. She told me to give it to you only if anything went wrong between you two on the wedding day. I didn't think I'd have to. He opened the envelope and unfolded the paper. May I? He asked Linda. Linda nodded with shaking shoulders. Daniel read in a quiet voice. My Emily, if this day is bright, keep this sealed and forget I ever wrote it. If it turns dark, please know I am sorry for the nights I fell short. I couldn't give you much, but I never stopped trying. I sold the locket Grandma left me because I wanted you to have a beautiful start. It was the last pretty thing I owned, but you were always the most beautiful thing I had. Mom. By the last line, half the room was crying. The other half was trying not to. Emily's bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. She covered her face and sobbed. Her shoulders shook as if the sound came from somewhere deep and long buried. The maid of honor reached out, but Emily stepped away, as if she knew this pain was hers to carry. Daniel set the letter on the table and looked at Emily with calm, sad eyes. I love you, he said softly, but I won't pretend this is okay. Your mother should never have been treated the way you treated her. Not after this. Not after everything. Emily nodded through her tears, unable to speak. She turned toward Linda. For a moment, Linda flinched, like a person who expects another blow. Then Emily took slow, uneven steps toward her mother. The hall held its breath. Mom, Emily whispered, standing just an arm's length away. Did you really sell Grandma's locket? The one you kept in the blue box. Linda nodded, wiping her cheeks. I did. It was yours, in a way. It always was. Emily's lips trembled. I told you not to help me. I said terrible things. I wanted to look strong. I wanted to belong to a family that looked perfect. I thought if I pushed you away, I could forget the hard years. Her voice broke again. I was wrong. Linda looked at her daughter's face. The same eyes she had kissed goodnight through fever and fear. We had hard years, she said gently, but we had us. That was never nothing. A long pause settled between them. The crowd remained quiet, as if any sound might ruin the fragile air around mother and daughter. From the groom's side, Daniel's father cleared his throat and stood up. He had been stiff and formal all evening. Now his voice was rough. Mrs. Carter, he said to Linda, I judged you. I thought you didn't care because we never saw you at fittings or tastings. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Others followed. A bridesmaid whispered, We didn't know. A cousin wiped his eyes and said, Thank you for the flowers. My wife loved them. Even the venue manager, standing near the doors, nodded with respect. Emily reached forward, then stopped. Can I hug you? She asked, as if asking permission to return to her own life. Linda took one step and opened her arms. Emily fell into them like a child who had run too far. They held each other and cried. The hall exhaled together. But the moment did not end there. Daniel looked at the receipt again, then at the letter, as if thinking of one last truth. He turned to the crowd and spoke with care. There's one more thing, he said. The jeweler kept the locket aside for 2 days, hoping Linda would change her mind. She didn't. But he also told me something else. He still has it. He didn't melt it. He said he felt it wasn't supposed to leave the family. The room stirred. Linda lifted her head. I went back yesterday, Daniel said, and I bought it back. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a tiny blue box. The same color Emily had just spoken about. A small sound escaped Linda's lips, half cry, half laugh. Daniel walked to Linda and placed the box in her palm. It belongs with you, he said. And when you're ready, only when you're ready, you can give it to Emily yourself. Linda opened the box with trembling fingers. The locket lay inside, simple and warm, like a kept promise. She pressed it to her heart and closed her eyes. The crowd began to clap softly, not in excitement, but in respect. Emily looked from the locket to Daniel, then back to her mother. I don't deserve your kindness, she whispered. Linda shook her head. Love isn't about deserving, she said. It's about choosing. The hall was quiet again, but it was a new kind of quiet, full, gentle breathing. Emily wiped her face and turned toward the microphone. She picked it up with both hands. Her voice was shaky but clear. I have something to say, she told the room. To all of you. And to my mother. Every eye lifted. Every chair stilled. The apology was coming. And with it, the choice that would decide what kind of family they would become. Emily stood with the microphone in both hands. Her mascara had bled into soft shadows under her eyes, but for the first time all night, her voice was calm. I spoke out of pride, she said. And fear. I wanted to look perfect in front of a perfect family. I blamed my mother for the years that were hard. But the truth is, those were the years she carried me. She turned to Linda. Mom, I hurt you in front of everyone. I said you didn't deserve to be here. I was wrong. You are the one who deserves honor today. I am sorry. The hall was so quiet that the microphone hum sounded like a whisper. A few guests wiped their eyes. Others looked at the floor, ashamed they had stayed silent earlier. Emily took a shaky breath. I can't undo what I said, she continued, but I can decide what I do next. And I want to start right now. She looked to the band. Could we have a moment, just one song? The bandleader nodded. Chairs scraped softly as people made space at the dance floor. Emily set the microphone down and walked toward Linda. She didn't rush or beg. She simply stopped a step away and held out her hands like a child asking for help. Would you dance with me? She asked. Linda hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, but because the pain still sat fresh and sore in her chest. She looked to Daniel. He met her eyes and gave a small nod that said, It's your call. Take your time. Linda placed the locket box in Daniel's hands for safekeeping. Then she reached for her daughter's fingers. They were cold and shaking. The band began to play something soft and steady. At first, their steps were clumsy, a misstep, a bump, a nervous laugh. But slowly the rhythm found them. Emily rested her forehead against Linda's shoulder the way she had as a little girl when storms frightened her. Linda closed her eyes. A new silence filled the room, not empty this time, but full and warm. When the song ended, the guests didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They stood together in a quiet that felt like respect. Emily picked up the microphone again. I have one more thing to say, she told the room. To Daniel's family, to mine, to everyone here. I've been pretending I don't come from struggle. I do. I come from a woman who taught me to keep going when there is no map. If I ever become a good wife or a good mother, it will be because I finally chose to learn from her. She turned to the head table. There is an empty chair up front, she said, voice firming. It was left in case a special guest arrived late. I would like my mother to sit there for the rest of the night. A ripple passed through the crowd. Daniel stepped forward and pulled out the chair himself. He held it for Linda like a small ceremony. As she sat, the maid of honor placed a corsage on her wrist that had been meant for a late aunt. It suits you, she whispered. Linda nodded, eyes shining. Then came the part no one expected. Emily faced Linda again, but she did not ask for forgiveness. I won't ask you to say it's okay tonight, she said softly. I don't deserve that. I want to earn it. If you let me, I'll call you tomorrow. And the day after. I'll come by and fix the kitchen drawer I promised to fix a year ago. I'll drive you to the clinic next week for your checkup. I will show up. Not just here. At home. A murmur of approval moved through the room. It wasn't grand or dramatic. It was ordinary, and because of that, it felt true. Daniel took the microphone for a moment. We'll postpone the bouquet toss and the games, he said with a gentle smile. Tonight, we celebrate differently. We'll start with the family photos, with Linda at the center. Laughter broke through the tears. People clapped. The photographer lifted his camera, signaling he was ready. But before the photos, Daniel turned back to Emily. There's one boundary I need to set, he said, kind but firm. I will love you with my whole heart. But I won't walk into a marriage where cruelty is a tool. If we need help, we'll get help. If we need space, we'll take space. What I won't do is stay quiet while we hurt good people. It landed not as a threat, but as a promise to build something honest. Emily nodded, swallowing hard. I agree, she said. We do this the right way. Linda watched them both thoughtful. Then she stood and addressed the room, her voice steady for the first time all evening. Thank you, she said. Not for clapping. For listening. I failed in many ways. I was tired, and sometimes I was hard. But I never stopped loving my daughter. I won't stop now. And I will accept the seat of honor, if it means I also accept the work that comes after tonight. That last line was the twist. Not a fairy tale fix, but a grown woman's truth. Forgiveness would not arrive like confetti. It would be built day by day. The photos began. In the first, Linda stood between Emily and Daniel. In the second, Daniel's parents stepped in. Daniel's father, who had apologized, shook Linda's hand with both of his. Welcome, he said simply. She nodded. Thank you. Dinner restarted, but the conversations felt different, softer, kinder. People asked real questions. An aunt told Linda she remembered seeing her carry Emily to school in the rain years ago. A cousin thanked Linda for the extra seats she quietly paid for. The venue manager sent over a small chocolate cake and wrote, "To New Beginnings," in white frosting. The band, without a word from anyone, learned a song from Linda's youth and played it between courses. She laughed when she recognized it, and the sound spread like light. Near the end of the night, Emily and Linda stepped outside for air. The parking lot glowed with soft lamps. Crickets sang. Emily rubbed her arms against the chill. I don't know how to fix all of it, she admitted. You won't fix it in one night, Linda said. We will fix it in many small mornings. Emily smiled through tears. Will you come by tomorrow? I kept the blue box from Grandma's old things. We can put the locket there together. Linda touched her pocket where the locket now rested. Tomorrow, she agreed. When they went back inside, Daniel met them at the door. He took Linda's hand and placed it over Emily's. Second entrance? He asked, half teasing. Just for us three. The doors opened, the band hit a warm chord, and the room turned as if the ceremony had begun again. Only this time, the walk was short and the steps were honest. They crossed the floor together. No big speech. No grand pose. Just a mother, a daughter, and the man who had chosen to tell the truth when it mattered. Later, as the lights dimmed and guests said their goodbyes, Emily hugged Linda tight. I love you, she said, the words plain and heavy and real. I know, Linda replied. We'll prove it. They didn't leave perfect. They left pledged to the hard work that love asks for after the music ends. And in that promise, the night finally felt like a beginning.